Ask a veteran of World War II what they thought of the M4 Sherman, and you'll often hear a bitter mixture of frustration, sarcasm, and a sense of betrayal. To many American tankers, the Sherman was too lightly armored, too easily set on fire, too tall, too thinly protected, too lightly armed to face German Tigers and Panthers, too prone to catastrophic explosions. The nickname Ronson, after the cigarette lighter that lights every time, summed up the tank's brutal reputation. German crews joked that the Sherman was the best tank we ever had, because they could destroy it with ease. Soviet tankers viewed it cautiously. British crews complained constantly. Even American infantrymen believed tankers fought in machines that were too vulnerable. This was the public image. But it wasn't the truth, because behind every criticism, behind every story of disaster, and behind every comparison to German heavy armor, there was a reality that historians would only fully appreciate decades after the war. The Sherman was hated by those who fought in it, but it was the tank that won World War II. Not because it was the strongest or most heavily armored or most intimidating tank on the battlefield, but because it was the tank that embodied everything the United States needed to win a global war. And to understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, to the moment when America realized it was about to enter the greatest conflict in history. The problem America faced in 1940, a war coming sooner than anyone expected. In 1939, when war broke out in Europe, the U.S. Army had fewer tanks than many South American countries. America was not prepared for mechanized warfare, blitzkrieg tactics, armored breakthroughs, rapid maneuver warfare, modern combined arms operations. The United States needed a tank, and it needed one fast. Not the best tank on Earth, not the most powerful tank. Not the tank that would win duels with German armor, but a tank that could be designed quickly, produced cheaply, transported easily, maintained by average mechanics, shipped across oceans, repaired in muddy fields, used in mass numbers by rapidly trained crews. In short, America needed a tank that could support a global war effort, not a perfect duelist. And the Sherman was exactly that tank. The design philosophy, a tank, made for a worldwide war. American engineers built the M4 with a simple philosophy. A tank that is good enough everywhere is better than a tank that is perfect nowhere. The Sherman was designed to be reliable. Its engine could run hundreds of miles without major breakdowns. German Panthers and Tigers often broke down after 150 miles. Easy to maintain. Most repairs could be done in the field with basic tools and minimal training. Easy to mass-produce factories across the U.S. could churn out thousands each month. Light enough for naval transport, a crucial factor because America fought a war across oceans. Standardized parts were interchangeable across versions, something the Germans struggled with constantly. Supported by a huge logistical chain, tanks need fuel, parts, mechanics, oil, ammunition, trained crews. The Sherman was built to fit into an enormous global supply network that no other nation could match. This philosophy was not glamorous. It did not impress tank duel enthusiasts. It did not satisfy crews who faced Panthers and Tigers. It did not look heroic on the battlefield, but it made the U.S. Army something far more important. Predictable, mobile supplied, and always able to fight tomorrow. This is what wins wars. Is the Sherman's greatest strength. It could be mass-produced like no other tank. From 1942 to 1945, the United States produced over 49,000 Shermans, more than any other tank model of the war. To put this into perspective, Germany produced 1,300 Tiger II tanks, Sapwan 350 Tiger-US tanks, Sha 6,000 Panthers, 8 S-500 Panzer IVs. That means For every Tiger Germany built, America built nearly 25 Shermans. But numbers alone don't tell the full story. The Sherman wasn't merely plentiful. It was designed to be repaired by an army that moved fast. German tanks often required factory-level servicing after long marches or heavy combat. A Sherman could be welded, patched, refitted, re-engined, rebuilt entirely in forward depots within days. A battle-damaged Panther might require weeks to repair, if it could even be transported. A damaged Sherman might return to battle within 48 to 72 hours. In a war of attrition, this mattered more than armor thickness. The fire hazard myth, why Shermans burned and what really changed. One of the most infamous criticisms of the Sherman was its tendency to catch fire. But the reason was not the engine or gasoline or poor design. The problem was ammunition storage. Early Sherman models stored shells in the hull sides, which were easily penetrated. When a round hit the ammunition rack, charges ignited, flames shot through the interior. Fuel lines ruptured. The tank burned violently. By the end of 1944, the U.S. introduced wet ammunition racks, surrounding shells with water jackets. This reduced catastrophic fires by 75%. In other words, the Sherman's worst reputation was based on a fixable early flaw, and the flaw was fixed. German tanks, by contrast, had many flaws that could not be fixed. Extreme mechanical complexity, unreliable transmissions, weak final drives, massive fuel consumption, poor cold weather reliability, thin side armor, supply chains too fragile to support them. The Sherman, unlike its opponents, actually improved during the war. The real fight. The Sherman was built for infantry support, not tank duels. Hollywood today imagines tank warfare as a series of dramatic duels. Sherman versus Tiger, Panther versus Sherman, a battlefield dominated by armored beasts. Reality was different. From U.S. Army statistics in Europe, only 15 to 20% of tank losses came from tank versus tank combat. Most Sherman missions involved infantry support, destroying bunkers, eliminating anti-tank guns, escorting supply convoys, countering ambushes, breaking fortified lines, providing mobile fire support, engaging soft targets, fighting in cities, clearing obstacles. And for these roles, the Sherman was excellent. The U.S. Army did not design its tank to fight the Tiger, because Germany had very few Tigers. They designed it to win the war by supporting infantry across continents, and it did exactly that. The Panther and Tiger problem, more dangerous than powerful. German tanks are legendary. They were powerful, intimidating, and terrifying to face. But they also had problems. The Sherman simply didn't. The Tiger and Chi, extremely slow to produce. 54 tons, maintenance nightmare, enormous fuel consumption, extremely fragile drivetrain. Required special bridges, broke down constantly. The Panther, devastating gun, excellent armor. But, transmission failures, engine fires, weak final drives, poor cross-country reliability, vulnerable to mines, extreme logistical burden. A tank is only as good as its ability to reach the battlefield. The Sherman could march 200 miles. Panthers often broke down after 30 or 40. This meant Sherman units arrived. Panther units frequently did not. The best tank in the world is useless if it dies before battle. The secret advantage of the Sherman. It never stopped moving. In modern mechanized warfare, a tank's real value is measured not only by firepower or armor, but by a far more important metric: operational mobility. The ability to move, advance, redeploy, refuel, repair, and fight again. Most German tanks failed this test. The Sherman passed it perfectly. Throughout the European campaign, American armored units advanced faster and farther than any other mechanized forces in the world. Not because their tanks were the strongest, but because they were the most reliable. A German Tiger that breaks down 20 miles from the front is no longer a weapon. It becomes a burden. It blocks roads. It requires special recovery vehicles. It drains precious fuel. It immobilizes crew. It can be destroyed by air attack. It often must be abandoned. A Sherman that keeps moving remains a fighting asset. German officers repeatedly wrote in war diaries, "The Americans always arrive faster than expected," and they knew why. Not because the Sherman was exceptional, but because it was dependable. The Sherman's most underrated feature: reliability under combat conditions. The U.S. Army evaluated tanks not in ideal factory tests, but in the harshest real-world conditions. Long road marches, muddy fields, frozen ground, desert climates, mountainous terrain, continuous operations, limited maintenance time, broken supply lines, continuous shelling, and air attacks. Under these conditions, the Sherman excelled. It had extremely high engine reliability, forgiving suspension, a rugged drivetrain, easily interchangeable parts, simple repair procedures, predictable fuel usage, fewer specialized components. Most breakdowns could be fixed by a crew of 5 in the field. Within a few hours, German breakdowns often needed factory mechanics, rare spare parts, rail transport, days or weeks of downtime, full engine or gearbox replacement. In 1944-45, Germany could barely maintain basic vehicles, let alone machines as complex as the Panther or Tiger. A Panther's final drive could fail after 150 kilometers of movement. A Sherman could operate 10 times that distance before requiring major service. This alone explains why American armored divisions outmaneuvered the Wehrmacht across France and Germany. The Sherman did not win the war because it was glamorous. It won because it was always present, always moving, always ready. The logistical miracle: the Sherman and the American supply machine. The Sherman was designed not as an isolated machine, but as a part of a global logistics system, unlike anything the world had ever seen. German tanks depended on supply lines that were constantly collapsing. Fuel shortages, air attacks on railways, destroyed bridges, lack of spare parts, frozen supply depots, horse-drawn logistics, chaotic command structure. American tanks were supported by an uninterrupted ocean of supplies. The U.S. produced more: gasoline, lubricants, rubber, spare parts, trucks, tools, cranes, fuel containers, repair vehicles, tank transporters, bulldozers, recovery vehicles than all Axis nations combined. A Sherman crew on the front line could request a part at night and receive it the next morning. A German crew might wait 2 weeks or never receive it at all. This is why American tanks were almost always ready for combat, while German armored units were often below half strength before the first battle even started. Logistics wins wars, and the Sherman was built to thrive inside the greatest logistics machine in history. The Sherman in combat: why tank versus tank was rare. One of the biggest misconceptions about WW2 is the belief that tank warfare was dominated by dramatic tank duels. In reality, the vast majority of armored combat was not tank versus tank at all. U.S. Army studies from 1944 to 45 show 60-70% of all threats to tanks were anti-tank guns and infantry weapons, such as Panzerfausts, Panzerschrecks, mines, and artillery. 15-20% were tank vs. tank engagements. 10-15% were air attacks, mechanical breakdowns, or abandoned vehicles. What does this mean? That the Sherman was designed first and foremost to deal with the majority of threats: at gun positions, dug-in infantry, fortified buildings, anti-tank teams, machine gun nests, artillery spotters, mobile infantry forces. Against these targets, the Sherman's fast turret rotation, excellent optics, reliable radio, quick acceleration, high mobility, large ammunition supply, fast-firing 75mm gun made it extremely effective. Tank crews who hated the Sherman were thinking of the 10% of situations when they faced a Panther or Tiger. They were not thinking of the 90% of missions the Sherman was designed to win. The Sherman's gun, why the 75 mm was not a mistake. Critics often attack the Sherman's 75 mm gun for being too weak to penetrate German heavy tanks, but the U.S. Army did not design the Sherman to be a tank killer. That role belonged to tank destroyers, artillery, air support, infantry. At teams, specialized 76 mm and Firefly variants. Later, the 75 mm gun was chosen because it was excellent for high explosive shells, fast to load, accurate and stable on the move, ideal for infantry support, deadly against lighter vehicles and fortifications, perfect for suppressing enemy positions. In 1944, a U.S. commander wrote, "We do not want a tank that kills tanks. We want a tank that kills Germans." The 75 mm did exactly that, and when tank duels became more frequent, America adapted. 76 mm M1 gun, HVAP ammunition, British Firefly with 17-pounder, up-armored Shermans, Easy 8 variants, new tactical doctrine. By late 1944, Shermans with upgraded guns could defeat Panthers frontally, at shorter ranges, and from the sides at normal combat distances. But the American way of war was never built on matching Germany tank for tank. It was built on overmatching Germany in everything that matters more: numbers, mobility, logistics, fire support, air power, battlefield integration. The Sherman was the perfect instrument for that strategy. The Panther and Tiger trap. Germany built tanks for the wrong war. German tanks were designed to fight short, high-intensity, operational-level battles in Eastern Europe. They were heavy, complex, fuel-hungry, maintenance-intensive, expensive, difficult to transport, slow to produce. But World War II evolved into a global conflict dominated by logistics, air superiority, strategic bombing, endless fronts, rapid redeployment, attrition, supply chain endurance, industrial production. In this world, the Sherman was the right tank. Not because it was perfect, not because it looked impressive, not because it terrified its enemies, but because it fit exactly into the kind of war the United States fought. Germany built masterpieces. America built the machine that wins wars. The power of numbers. When 10 good tanks beat one great tank. In nearly every engagement between Shermans and German heavy tanks, the outcome followed a consistent pattern. German tanks inflicted early losses, but were quickly outmaneuvered, surrounded, flanked, cut off, disabled by artillery, destroyed by air power, or abandoned due to mechanical failure. Why? Because heavy German tanks were rare, slow to repair, and limited by fuel shortages. Meanwhile, U.S. armored divisions were mobile, aggressively supplied, constantly reinforced, always able to bring more tanks forward, supported by vast artillery networks, supported by P-47s and P-51s overhead, coordinated through excellent radios. A common saying among U.S. tankers was, "If you see a Tiger, call for artillery." And it worked. The Sherman rarely won the duel, but it won the war around the duel. Because in modern war, the side that moves fastest wins. The side that resupplies fastest wins. The side that repairs fastest wins. The side that replaces losses fastest wins. The Sherman did all of this better than any tank in Europe. The Sherman was never alone. The real power of the American way of war. The greatest misunderstanding about the Sherman is that many people analyze it in isolation, as if tank combat was simply Sherman versus Panther or Sherman versus Tiger. But the United States Army did not fight that kind of war. American armored doctrine was built on teamwork, not duels. A U.S. tank platoon was never intended to face a Tiger by itself. Not for 1 minute. Not under any circumstance. When the enemy had heavy armor, the Americans responded with a coordinated, layered system: artillery, tank destroyers, infantry, air support, engineers, mechanized cavalry, and more Shermans. The Sherman's strength was not in a single vehicle. Its strength was the entire American war machine behind it. A German tank crew might face indirect fire from 105mm and 155mm guns, P-47, Thunderbolts dropping rockets and bombs, tank destroyers with 76mm or 90mm guns, infantry with bazookas, flanking maneuvers by Shermans, anti-tank mines, smoke screens, coordinated assaults, logistical starvation. A Tiger was a terrifying machine, but it was rarely able to fight in the isolated, controlled, idealized conditions. Modern myths imagine the Sherman, as part of a combined arms system, became far more dangerous than its specifications suggest. The real war, artillery and air power, not tank duels. The U.S. Army entered Y with a clear understanding: artillery wins battles, air power wins campaigns, logistics wins wars. Tanks were just one layer of a larger machine. In Normandy, across France, and in Germany, American armored divisions had access to overwhelming divisional artillery, corps-level artillery, massive rocket batteries, highly trained forward observers, quick response fire missions, perfect radio coordination, near constant air support, reconnaissance aircraft, guiding strikes, fighter bombers waiting for targets. When German heavy tanks appeared, Shermans did not have to win alone. A Tiger might destroy 3 or 4 Shermans, but then a P-47 would hit it from the air. Artillery barrages would immobilize it. Infantry would attack its flanks. It would run out of fuel. It would break down trying to withdraw. It would be abandoned by its crew. It would be destroyed by engineers. It would be outnumbered 10-1. German tank crews repeatedly wrote, "It was not the Sherman that defeated us. It was artillery and aircraft." The Sherman was simply the vehicle that kept advancing after the Tiger was destroyed. The Sherman's turret rotation, the most underrated advantage on the battlefield. One of the quiet secrets of the Sherman's effectiveness is something rarely mentioned today: its turret traverse speed. The Sherman used a hydraulic system that allowed the turret to rotate much faster than German tanks. This mattered greatly in close-range firefights, village combat, ambushes, sudden encounters, mobile engagements, forest combat, Normandy, Hurtgen. Many crews reported that their survival often depended on turning the turret first. German Tigers and Panthers had strong guns, but slow turrets. Sherman crews could acquire targets in seconds. A U.S. tanker once said, "If we saw each other at the same time, we got the first shot." Against the Panther or Tiger, the first shot rarely killed the enemy, but it disrupted them, forced them to button up cracked optics, damaged tracks, blinded commanders, created smoke, forced turret rotation, broke their firing solution. In real combat, this mattered far more than raw penetration statistics. The Sherman's height, a weakness that was also a strength. The Sherman was tall. Crews hated this. It made them easier to spot. It made them more visible in open fields. It made them bigger targets. But that height had an unexpected benefit. The interior was spacious. Crew fatigue was lower. Visibility was excellent. Ammunition storage was safer after 1944 upgrades. Crew coordination was faster. Escape routes were easier under fire. A Sherman crew could survive a hit because they had room to move. A Panther or Tiger crew, fighting inside a cramped steel box with complex machinery everywhere, often died instantly or could not escape in time. German tank crews were elite, but they were physically exhausted inside their vehicles. American crews were usually not. In long battles, fatigue decides survival as much as armor thickness. The Sherman's crew ergonomics, the best of the war. Modern tank experts consistently praise the Sherman for one thing above all: ergonomic design. American engineers prioritized Easy access to controls, simple optics layout, logical instrument placement, spacious crew positions, safe ammunition storage, later models, consistent training across all variants, exceptional radio equipment. German tanks, in contrast, often sacrificed comfort and usability for power and armor. A Panther's driver was squeezed into a narrow, cramped position. Tiger loaders worked in confined spaces that slowed reloading speed. Turret radios were unreliable. Optics were excellent, but easily damaged. A Sherman crew could reload faster, communicate faster, and stay operational longer under stress. War is not a contest of machines, it is a contest of humans inside machines. The Sherman supported its crew. German tanks punished theirs. Radios, the Sherman's invisible weapon. Another often forgotten advantage. Every Sherman had an excellent radio. German tanks often had unreliable radios, limited range, poor internal communication, commanders forced to open hatches, issues under fire, equipment damaged after the first hit. The Sherman's radios allowed instant coordination, quick flanking maneuvers, rapid changes in formation, precise artillery calls, calling for air support, real-time intelligence, synchronized advances, ambushing German armor with teamwork. A single Tiger might defeat a single Sherman, but a platoon of Shermans with perfect communication would surround and destroy that Tiger from 3 sides. And U.S. tankers did exactly that again and again. German tanks fought as individuals. American tanks fought as networks. In modern warfare, the network wins. The Sherman versus infantry. Why American ground troops loved it. Infantry units in Wu often felt abandoned or unsupported by their armored counterparts, but U.S. infantry consistently praised the Sherman. Why? Because it always showed up. A Sherman could cross muddy fields, push through forests, break walls, provide smoke, fire, heat shells rapidly, blast machine gun nests, suppress at guns, support assaults, protect advances, follow infantry closely, coordinate radio fire missions. U.S. infantry officers repeatedly wrote, "The Sherman was our shield." German heavy tanks could rarely show up on time. They were too slow, too heavy, or broken down. The Sherman was always there when infantry needed it most. The Sherman's speed, not fast on paper, but fast in war. The Sherman's top speed on paper was respectable but not extraordinary. But speed on a clean test track means nothing in a real campaign. The Sherman's practical speed, its ability to maintain momentum in real terrain, was exceptional. It could turn on narrow farm roads, drive through hedgerows, climb steep embankments, cross weak bridges, travel long distances without overheating, redeploy rapidly, maneuver in towns, avoid soft ground, follow infantry across complex terrain. This mobility allowed American armored divisions to perform breathtaking maneuvers. The breakout from Normandy, the dash across France, the relief of Bastogne, the push across the Rhine, the rapid penetration of Germany. German tank units simply could not do this. Their tanks were too heavy, too fuel-hungry, too fragile mechanically. Mobility wins campaigns. The Sherman had mobility in abundance. The evolution of the Sherman, it did not stay weak. Another myth, that the Sherman never improved. In reality, the Sherman evolved continuously. Better armor, wet ammunition racks, improved suspensions, HVSS, the Easy 8 upgrades, the 76mm gun, HVAP rounds, British Firefly, 17-pounder conversions, command variants, recovery variants, flamethrower variants, rocket-assisted variants, up-armored field modifications. By late 1944 and 1945, The Sherman was no longer the same tank that landed in North Africa. It was faster, better armed, safer, and far more lethal. And it remained completely reliable. The Sherman's greatest weapon, the American soldier inside it. A tank is not steel alone. It is the crew that drives it, loads it, aims it, repairs it, and fights from within it. The Sherman was designed not as a machine of intimidation, but as a machine for ordinary Americans to master quickly and use effectively. Sherman crews were minimally trained at the beginning of the war, often young, often inexperienced, drawn from farms, factories, and small towns, placed into a vehicle that had to work the first time, required to learn the battlefield fast, dependent on fast communication, forced to trust their equipment completely. The Sherman allowed them to do this. German tanks, even the mighty Panthers and Tigers, were built for elite, hand-picked crews with years of mechanical knowledge and specialized training. The United States needed a tank that could turn a factory worker into a tank crewman in weeks, not months or years. That tank was the Sherman. This was not an accidental advantage. It was a deliberate strategic decision. The Sherman and the Industrial War, when strategy beats engineering. World War II was not decided by the thickness of armor or the diameter of the gun. It was decided by fuel, steel, shipping capacity, ammunition, spare parts, trained mechanics, road networks, working bridges, mass production, rail capacity, and the ability to replace losses. In every one of these areas, the Sherman was perfectly aligned with the American way of war. Germany built tanks as if each one were a masterpiece, handcrafted, over-engineered, slow to produce, requiring rare metals, needing specialized factories, impossible to replace quickly, fragile when pushed too hard. The United States built tanks as if they were a component of a much larger engine. A Sherman was not a masterpiece. It was a part of a machine built to be unstoppable. Germany built perfect tanks for the wrong war. America built the right tank for the real war. The Sherman outnumbered, and yet always ahead. Even when Shermans were outnumbered tactically, they were rarely outnumbered operationally. Why? Because the U.S. Army always had more. Fuel, ammunition, maintenance vehicles, recovery vehicles, spare parts, replacement crews, artillery support, air support, mobility. A German panzer battalion might field 30 operational tanks on paper, 12 actually working, 4 to 6 Panthers breaking down on the way, 2 to 3 Tigers running out of fuel, and maybe 6 to 8 vehicles ready for battle. An American armored battalion with 50 Shermans might start a day with 45 functional, 40 ready for combat, damaged tanks repaired by nightfall, replacements arriving the next morning. By the time a German heavy tank crew fought its second or third battle, it was often alone, unsupported, low on fuel, and facing enemies on all sides. A Sherman crew? They were part of a division that could regenerate itself every 24 hours. This was the deciding factor. The Sherman never fought alone, and that is why it won. The Sherman was not meant to be a duel champion. It was meant to be the central node in a network of overwhelming American firepower. A Sherman encountering a Tiger did not rely on luck. It relied on doctrine. Call artillery, call air support, flank, smoke, suppress, maneuver, outnumber, outrepair, outlast. German tanks fought alone. American tanks fought as part of a symphony. The Sherman was the melody, supported by 1,000 instruments. This is the difference between a tank designed to win a duel and a tank designed to win a war. The final offensives, how the Sherman crushed Germany in the end. In the final year of the war, Sherman's advanced with a speed no heavy German tank could match. During the Ardennes counteroffensive, the Sherman proved again why reliability wins wars. German Panthers and Tigers ran out of fuel, froze in the winter, broke down, were abandoned, could not maneuver through forested terrain, could not cross weak bridges, were hunted by P-47s, were flanked by faster American armor. Shermans climbed icy roads, turned on narrow mountain paths, repaired themselves in the field, refueled constantly, kept moving through snow and mud, coordinated their attacks by radio, arrived at Bastogne in time, supported infantry with brutal efficiency. In the final push into Germany, Shermans crossed rivers, forests, rubble-filled streets, destroyed roadblocks and advanced block by block through cities. Heavy German tanks were often left behind. They simply could not keep up. When Berlin fell, it wasn't Panther crews fighting on every street. It was infantry, because almost all heavy German armor was destroyed, abandoned, or out of fuel. The Sherman outlived its enemies. Its son, the strategic truth, why the Sherman won the war. Sherman crews hated their tank because they knew its vulnerabilities. They fought at the point of danger. They saw friends die. They faced weapons designed to kill them. But their tank won because it fit a strategy that no German design could counter. The Sherman won because it was reliable. It was mobile. It was easy to repair. It was easy to ship. It was easy to produce. It had excellent optics and radios. It supported infantry perfectly. It worked inside a massive logistics system. It always showed up. The Sherman was not a duelist. It was a conqueror. It conquered by showing up everywhere, in numbers, with supplies, with air support, with artillery behind it, with infantry beside it, with spare parts following it, with replacements arriving daily. No German tank could match that. Not even close. To the final word, the tank the world underestimated. The Sherman tank was criticized, feared, cursed by its crews, mocked by its enemies, misunderstood by historians. But it was also the tank that liberated Europe, the tank that crushed the Wehrmacht, the tank that kept moving when others stopped the tank, that could be repaired in a field, the tank that fit the war. America actually fought the tank that spearheaded the greatest mechanized advance in history. The Sherman was not perfect. It was not glamorous. It was not invincible. But it was enough to carry the U.S. Army from North Africa to Germany, through hedgerows and cities, across mountains and rivers, into the heart of a collapsing empire. In war, the perfect machine rarely wins. The machine that is always there wins every time. The Sherman was always there, and that is why it won the war.